Hi, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Dave, and we're the IB English guys. Today we're going to talk about the HL essay. Specifically, we're going to talk about the line of inquiry and developing a powerful thesis statement.
For our preview of today's video, first we're going to review the HL essay task. After that, we'd like to talk about the components of what makes a strong HL essay thesis. And finally, we're going to end by offering you 5, maybe 6 samples of lines of inquiry and thesis statements that we feel are successful.
Yeah, that's great. I think looking at good samples is a great way to think about how you're going to write your own and come up with your own ideas. So the HL essay, just to remind you, is 1,200 to 1,500 word essay in which you develop a line of inquiry. And you're going to look at, it could be a non-literary text if you're a Lang-Lit student, or it could be a literary text if you are a literature student. If you're a Lang-Lit student, you can do either non-literary or literary.
Now, the course guide is very specific in what it says, and I'd like to read this for you now. The course guide says, the essay requires students to construct a focused, analytical argument examining the work from a broad literary or linguistic perspective. Mr. Giles, can you take that and translate that into simpler English?
Yeah, we're looking at this text from that sort of literary, we're having a literary angle to examine our text, and we're thinking about literary craft or linguistic craft.
Yeah, I like that. And really, Mr. Giles, when you think about the components of a good thesis statement, they're really not that difficult. Of course, you need to have the title of the work, the author, and the genre of study. That is essential, and that must be in your thesis. What else do we need?
We also need to have a literary or linguistic aspect. This is, again, that broad literary perspective they're talking about. So our thesis statement, our line of inquiry, needs to encompass a literary aspect. This is sometimes forgotten by a lot of students.
What are some examples of literary aspects that a student might explore?
We could talk about character, we could look at setting, we could look at something structural, we could look at the use of contrast.
You could look at sound devices, it could be ambiguity, it could be dialogue, really pretty much any literary aspect or language aspect you want to explore.
I think motifs make interesting lines of inquiry. We want to think like a literary scholar or a linguistic scholar where we're looking at something.
And when thinking like a scholar, of course you want to say something insightful, something very deep that captures the essence of the text. You might want to consider linking out to the 7 concepts of the course when formulating your thesis. Of course, the 7 concepts are communication, creativity, perspective, representation, identity, culture, and transformation. So think about linking back into those as you're formulating your work.
Yeah, that could be a great way to sort of ask questions of a text and think about any one of those concepts to arrive at a really interesting argument. Okay, so now we want to take a look at some sample thesis statements so we can see this in action. And I think these are really great starts for an HL essay.
Why don't I read the first one, Mr. Giles, and we can talk about what we like.
Great.
The first statement reads, in the 1972 drama Sizwe Banzi is Dead, Axel Fugard utilizes symbols of masks and the motif of acting to illustrate the dehumanizing and unjust treatment of black South Africans during apartheid. Pretty strong thesis, Mr. Giles. What do you like?
Yeah, again, it has the title and author and genre, and all of these do. So that's covered. What I really like about this is just thinking about the mask and the motif of acting and putting on an act. And again, it's really capturing the sort of essential aspect of the play about how black South Africans were dehumanized and mistreated. It's off to a really good start. It's very clear.
Yeah, we talk about power imbalance and injustice in our course quite often, because this is a really solid topic to explore. Why don't you read the second one, Mr. Giles, and we can talk about what we like about that.
Yeah, in the novel Claire of the Sea of Light, Edwidge Danticat integrates rich description of the sea, weather, flora, and fauna. These act as symbols to portray a deteriorating society and environment in a constant struggle for survival.
Yeah, this is another really fantastic thesis statement. If you're not familiar with the author, I believe she's Haitian, right? And she writes sort of about the struggle that this developing nation in the Western Hemisphere has, and the plight they go through. And of course, symbols and looking at the deterioration of nature and society is an integral part of her work. And the student obviously knows the author well, and they're pursuing the correct line of inquiry for this author and for this text.
Yeah, I love that. Think about the scene. Notice that it's 2 sentences. Nothing says that a thesis statement has to be 1 sentence. I really like it as 2. It's much easier to read and make meaning of. Okay, the next one's a Langlet, or no, sorry, the number 3 is a literary text as well. In her novel, The Awakening, Kate Chopin uses the sea and swimming to symbolize Edna's attempt to escape from the cultural constraints of society.
Well, the first thing I noticed, and hopefully you notice this too, students, is that we're establishing a pattern here. The literary genre, or if it's a non-literary text, that mode of text is identified. In this case, it's a novel. We always see the author's name, and we always see that red and the green, right? So we have the literary aspect as well as the idea. Just notice the consistency. Now, speaking of the ideas themselves, Mr. Giles, what do you like about this?
Yeah, just the idea. I like how concise this thesis statement is, and the whole idea of escaping from the cultural constraints of society is quite clear and quite central to that work. So
it is clear. You don't always have to have a long and convoluted thesis. Sometimes something simple but insightful can be just as powerful, and that's the case here.
Yeah.
All right. Now the next one is a Langlet sample, and I'd like to read this aloud. In the Made of More advertising campaign, Guinness uses cinematic elements to convey a new definition of masculinity, one that encompasses cooperation, empathy, and care. I love it.
Yeah, I do too. I just think it's interesting. Cinematic elements is a little broad, but again, I can see how they're going to talk about, again, this is a video ad they're going to explore, and they're going to talk about various cinematic elements that the use of the camera, and the angle, and the lighting, and all the things they can talk about. It's very rich. And I love the green. Yeah,
the green. The message is very critical as well. Whether it's Gillette or Guinness or any other company that's out there right now, there's a shift in ideology happening where men don't want to be perceived as strong and tough. We're redefining the word masculinity, and Guinness is a company that's doing that. And I think that's a really insightful and interesting choice for this course.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what comes after the comma is, I think, really important. If it had stopped about a new definition of masculinity, period, that might not argue enough, but it actually elaborates on what that is. That's pretty clever.
I think if they had stopped at the word masculinity when I were making my examiner comments, I would say elaborate or explain more. I really need that refined and focused bit at the end. Let's do one more, Giles.
Yeah, let's do one more. I want to do one more that's a documentary one. In her provocative documentary 13th, director Ava DuVernay uses archival footage and photos as well as allusions to history to convey the legacy of slavery and systemic racism in modern-day United States.
Yeah, again, I really like this one. If you're not familiar with the director, she's fantastic. She produces a lot of content that looks at systemic racism, and her documentaries are very rich in archival footage, photos, and allusions. These are very specific to documentaries, and I think the student is really going to do a nice job exploring the cinematic features, which are different for documentaries than they are for regular films.
Yeah, and again, I think this is I think these are essential elements, and again, that whole connection to history is really central to her whole thesis of the film itself. So quite interesting. So what we hope you take away from this is just thinking about the essential components of a thesis statement. I think really when you think about making sure that you have that broad literary or linguistic aspect that you're exploring, and to me it's the green. The green is the argument. It's the essence of your paper. So you really need both.
Yeah, I always like to tell my students, think about the common answer and don't write that. Don't write that. Think more. Once you have a sort of an average answer, think more, go deeper, be more insightful, do some research. Think about what is truly the essence of the text. Take what your teacher gave you and go beyond.
Yeah, once you have that thesis statement, you have that argument, then you're outlining, and then you're off and running. You have a real purpose to your paper.
Okay, folks, we hope that this video on writing thesis statements for the higher level essay was helpful. We've given you some models that you can follow. Don't forget the essential components. And as always, keep on coming back, watching. We are making videos for you. Have a good day.
Bye, guys.